So for transition questions, remember that we always need to read the sentence before the transition and the sentence afterwards. And dumb summaries are going to help you kind of understand the relationship between them. So we think about things like positives and negatives and stuff like that. These sentences, though, are kind of tricky. It's not obvious what the connotation is, right? So let's look at them. Because digital systems record indiscriminately, they cannot discern important parts of the proceedings from other noises in the courtroom. So I guess maybe that sounds negative, right? Because something bad is happening to the recordings. And so then we say a digital device does indeed record everything, but that includes loud noises, such as a book dropping, that can make the actual words spoken impossible to hear. So that also seems negative. So what's the transition? Well, there really isn't one. It doesn't seem like there's a flip. I mean, there is a transition of sorts, but it's not an obvious transition. Now, that might make it tricky. But here's the thing about these transition questions. We can also use dumb summaries for the transition words that are in the choices. So each of these complicated sounding long words actually stands in for a shorter word that we probably use all the time in our speech. And the words may be spelled differently, but most of the time here, they're actually going to have similar meanings. And so if we can find ones that are like the same, we can usually eliminate them. So the words therefore and consequently both basically mean something like so. Right? It's like a because word. It's like a cause and effect. It means something happens because something else has happened. Therefore, or as a consequence, right? So they may look totally different, but the words therefore and consequently are in the same category, in the same box. I have them in literal boxes in my study guide where I put the words in boxes so that you can link them together. So here's the case where if we know that they mean the same thing, it probably means that they're both wrong, because then I wouldn't really have any way of determining which one is right and which one is wrong if they basically have the same meaning. Occasionally there are exceptions to this, but it's so rare, and right now it's going to help us out a lot. So now we have an easier choice. Do we need a word like despite this, a transition like that, which has a clear but connotation? Despite this is what we want to do when we want to switch gears and change the direction of what we're saying, right? It's kind of like the word however. It means the same thing. So we're not doing that. We just said it's kind of negative and it stays negative. In other words, well, that could work, right? In other words means we're literally saying the same thing in other words. So that fits. It's kind of maybe like a little bit of an and in a way. A better way to think of it is kind of like, maybe like a for example, right? It's kind of taking what we already know and maybe simplifying it or clarifying it. And that's kind of what's happening here, is it's saying it cannot discern or hear different parts of the proceeding from the other noises. And then the second sentence is kind of giving us an example of that, right? It records everything, including the book dropping and the actual words, which makes it harder to hear them. So these two sentences are working together to say the same thing, and so B is the choice that would give us that. And it's definitely not C and D, even just because of the meaning of the words, because it's not a because. They're not saying that one thing happened because of something else. Like I said, these sentences say the same thing. Literally, it's the second sentence is providing the same information in new words. So it fits perfectly. But I definitely think that thinking in terms of these dumb summaries for both the passage and the choices is really helpful on these transition questions, because you can use this little SAT game to get rid of two choices sometimes, and then your decision just becomes a lot easier. And I would have no doubt here, but it's because I was able to eliminate C and D right from the start without even having to consider them. So I recommend trying to use that strategy when you can.